Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the program where we take films and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man who used to make a living going door to door, selling falsely inscribed Bibles to recent widows like a movie you may have seen before, Mr. Ryan Seybold.
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
It is going well, and I am looking forward to getting into this one today because I know people have a lot of different opinions, and it'll be interesting to see how ours compare to one another. We are looking at Conclave. Ryan, go ahead with that description, sir.
That's right, buddy. Today's film is Conclave, which very succinctly tells the story of the passing away of the current pope in the opening moments of the film, and then shows us the twists and turns of religious and political quarreling behind the scenes with a gathering of Catholic cardinals from around the globe as they seal themselves away in Vatican City and elect the new pope. The film stars Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, and Isabella Rossellini, and was directed by Edward Berger as his follow-up to his 2022 hit All Quiet on the Western Front. This film was on a lot of top-of-the-year lists, made around $92 million, and earned a solid amount of awards and nominations of awards. So I was eager to see what the buzz was about here. Quick warning to the viewers, we will be getting into some serious spoilers to properly discuss this. So, Jason, we've sequestered ourselves away to vote on this film today, and I gotta ask you as always, are we giving this film gray smoke or white smoke?
Somebody knows their religion. I had no idea about the smoke, right? Like, it's all brand new to me. But Ryan, I will be happy to tell you here in my opening statement. Now, Conclave is both one of the most beautifully shot films that I have ever seen, as well as one of the most magnificently scored. At the same time, it features shoddy, one-dimensional characterization and Hollywood's most lackluster script in recent memory. This is a film that is so self-assured and going absolutely nowhere that it's rather impressive. It's like someone sitting around a campfire telling a really shitty story in the most fascinating way possible. I was so into this film from the onset, and every 10 minutes I just found myself like more and more depressed. Kudos to all the technical people involved, but at the end of the day, Conclave can't find anything interesting to say about its narrative or its characters. Ryan, what did you think?
Jason, I am so torn on this film. It is no doubt a technical masterpiece, like you said, but also holds about the narrative excitement that you'd expect from getting 100 or so crusty old dudes in a room together. On one hand, this is one of those movies that you could pause at any moment, print out that frame, and hang it on your wall. But I couldn't have been more bored throughout this movie. Absolutely. Director Edward Berger did about as much as he could with this film, as did all of the actors, I suppose, although their characters amounted to just a pile of stereotypes, like a Brat Pack film of the 1980s. No, Jason, my problems lie mainly with the source material. All of the reveals and dun-dun-dun moments held so little weight, I felt like this story continued to pull its punches. One cardinal had a secret kid, another bribed for Pope votes, and with each reveal, we got a response from the film's protagonist that amounted to nothing more than, oh, well, that's not good, is it? Add to that the confounding plot twist that had me scratching my head that included a suicide bomber in Vatican City, which is just beyond me how that could happen during a conclave of such magnitude, and the ending of the film where it's revealed that the new pope elected is intersex and has a uterus? Now, don't get me wrong, I get that this would cause shockwaves amongst the Catholic religion, but you introduce this mystery character right up front, dribbled out details about this guy very lightly, so when he's elected, you're already waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's no surprise and amounts to about as much shock as the worst of the worst Shyamalan films. It's a very Scooby-Doo style ending, and I was so bored and underwhelmed, and at the same time, my jaw was just on the floor for all of the technical work put into this film, so I think we agree on this one, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'd like to start today's discussion by talking about one of the film's great strengths that I mentioned, which is its score. You know, we don't often have a ton of opportunity to discuss score, but I do think it's one of like the film's central aspects of its DNA. It was composed by a gentleman named Volker Bertelmann, if I'm saying that correctly. I'm probably not. He's a German composer and pianist who was also a former rapper. It was very interesting to find.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Now, he did win. To your point, he did win an Oscar for director Edward Berger's previous film, All Quiet on the Western Front, which, Ryan, I know is a film you very much enjoyed and did actually a podcast episode on. And
I did.
as I was watching the movie and listening to it, it reminded me of that great classic score that John Ottman did for The Usual Suspects, where it interjects suspense and drama into scenes that would otherwise lack any sort of punch. So big kudos to our composer and for the score of Conclave. Ryan, what did you think about it?
Yeah, same. To your point, this film was loaded with scenes that needed some punch. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
Our man Bertelman had his job cut out for him, and he delivered. I thought that the score was fantastic. It was all about, to me, the score, the cinematography, and the blocking, and just the overall technical directing of Mr. Berger. So I thought Berger did a great job for what he was given. I think the script is what, suffers the most for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I really think, again, the reason the score did a lot of that heavy lifting is because it was almost like we know what the film is trying to do, right? Like it wants you to have this like dun 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 moment when, again, you find out that John Lithgow bought votes or that, the other person has a kid or whatever. But the way that the film progresses, like the story-wise, none of those moments really hit at all. It sounds like you had the same response. So for the composer to come in and be like, don't worry, fam, I got you. I understand what you're trying to do here. You didn't do it, but let me work my magic. And so all of a sudden you watch it and you're like, oh, wow, that was dramatic. Or like, there's a part of you inside that feels like it's dramatic, but then your brain catches up and it's like, no, it wasn't. No, that's just the score guy doing a bunch of work.
Right. Yeah. And the camera work and all of that. Sure. Yeah. The story was so repetitious, dude. I felt like I was caught in a story loop until the bomb went off. Like it was just like rinse, lather, repeat over and over again. I was just stuck in narrative mud. It's also not lost on me that, and I may get a little hot water here, but I'm going to say it anyways. For starters, I feel like the Catholic Church has lost a fair amount of footing in American culture. Especially compared to evangelical Christians these days. So the very premise of just electing a new pope doesn't hold a lot of weight to me personally. Like, I don't know when the last time I saw the current pope be of a huge amount of weight in my daily life or in our culture, religiously or narratively or whatever you want to say, just whether it's abortion or gay rights or any of the things that a religion or Catholic Church used to have so much of a say in and put a lot of weight behind on one side or the other. I don't really feel like they have a lot of that anymore. And number two, I feel like the film pulled a lot of its punches here, where it could have easily gone into the more hard-hitting scandals of like abuse the church has wrestled with, and instead opted for more like tame scandals, like, oh, well, he had a kid and he's being well taken care of. How dare he, I get that that's a big deal for Catholic priests or whatever that are supposed to be, abstaining and having abstinence and stuff like that. But, given the church's history of scandal, pick another one off that tree, bro. Like there's a bunch.
Yeah. And one aspect I thought that could have been really interesting that the film, I thought it was actually going to go into more of this, and I was kind of disappointed when it didn't, is just the nature of the push and pull between the more traditional, strongly conservative religious figures, and then, some of the more liberal Catholic figures like we see represented by Stanley Tucci in the film, because we know that the current Pope is, considered by many, many people to be very strongly liberal, especially when it comes to his opinion on gay rights and acceptance of people of a different faith and everything about that. And so, I kind of felt like maybe the film was going to sort of allude to his influence on the church and, what are very likely a lot of fissures that has created within the Catholic movement. And that would have been a very interesting aspect to explore within the film by having all these different figureheads, but instead it's not really attempting to say anything about the nature of belief or religion or, what it should or shouldn't be doing. It basically just takes this as a setup and then tries to make it into essentially like a mystery. It's almost in its weird way, like sort of like a detective story of like, what's going to happen? Who's going to be made Pope? And like, it's trying to give you these twists and turns along the way, but again, none of them hold much weight. The scandals aren't really very scandalous. And, even, the big reveal by, that the guy who gets elected Pope is intersex. Like, okay, well, yeah, if we take a step back, were that to, be revealed down the road, that would obviously be a huge topic of discussion, within the church. And what would that say about their beliefs and all of that?
Some would say my chromosomes would define me as being a woman. And yet I'm also, as you see me.
It kind of just drops its mic after that. It's like, yeah, dude was intersex, right? What do you think about that? Bam. And you're like,
right.
It's a decision, but like, I felt like that decision came so far out of left field relative to what we were dealing with. It's one of those things where it's like, you didn't see that coming, did you? And it's like, well, no, why would I? What place does that have in a film like this? Like, nothing about the film leading up to that point had anything to do with commentaries on, sex and sexuality or like anything. So it was almost like they just plucked a reveal out of a different movie and then dropped it in here. And so when it happens, you're like, well, that's a twist, but it's certainly not satisfying,
Right. No, that's why I compared it to, the worst of Shyamalan's repertoire, because it really did feel like, you watch The Happening and it's like people are dying. What's going on? And then you get towards the end and the third act reveal is like, it was the trees. It's like, really, bro? It was the trees? Come on now. Because like the environment, right? And it's like, no, I get it, but come on.
Yeah.
And you knew a twist was coming too. Like, and the way
had to, right?
Ray Fiennes as the deacon or dean or whatever of the whole shenanigans of the Conclave was and sequestering, has been investigating this guy, from the start. And then when, finally he's elected Pope, his homie, who's, by the way, his homie is able to leave and come back, it seems. I never really understood that, how he's got someone that's able to leave the sequestering to go find out, because that's who gave him the information about the suicide bombing and stuff too. I didn't really catch that. But he's like, oh, he went for this surgery and then, the old Pope knew about it. We were going to have that taken out, but he decided he was fine the way God made him. He was born with a uterus, but he's not like transsexual. He's not like, they didn't elect Dr. Frankenfurter to be the new Pope or something. You know what I mean? Like, he's just a dude that has some.
It's not like, we've got a transsexual Pope now, deal with it, world. Like, it wasn't that.
Sure.
Like, it's just like, I mean, he presents as a dude and that's how he identifies. He just happened to, like you said, got some lady parts that he was born with, but I don't, they're just sort of there, whatever, So it's like, okay, so there's just this dude and nobody's going to know he has a uterus. And like, again, that's a twist. Like, I don't know. Doesn't seem like much of one to me.
Slow push on turtle. Da, da, da.
Right. Now, let's actually move on to one of the film's other strengths, which is the cinematography. This is done by a gentleman named Stephen Fontaine. And it is absolutely stunning. I think that so much of what makes this film work is just the fact that like everything is so stunningly shot. That
gorgeous,
dude. So like, for example, the trailer, I think a large part of the reason why this film did so well is because it does have a spectacular trailer. And the reason it has a spectacular trailer is because what have we talked about here, right at the top of this show, which is the two aspects of this movie that absolutely crush are the cinematography and the score. So you can take any 3 minutes worth of footage and, take it and then marry it to any 3 minutes of the score and present that to people. And it's going to look like a fucking banger because that's what is so strong about this film. But then you unfortunately have the characterization in the story, which, the characters are all one-dimensional. Like you said, everybody's like, you're the buy-in votes guy and you're the, guy who's trying to keep his kid quiet or whatever. But it never really factors into like who these people are. It feels like they're all essentially the same person. They're just told like, you have a kid and you bought votes, but like it doesn't really factor into the nature of their personality so much.
Well, their characters are all just stereotypes. Like, I'm the liberal one and I'm the old-timey kind of racist one and I'm the mystery bad boy that's off in the corner. Like, I'm the guy that you would take home to mom. It was like a Catholic boy band. But you're right, dude. The cinematography was the standout. It was odd to me that Berger switched from using James Friend, who won an Oscar for All Quiet, his last cinematographer. Okay. I guess James went on to go do other stuff. Maybe he was just booked or whatever. But it does show to me that Berger is most likely a visual attuned director. If he could do this kind of work, or at least find other cinematographers to work with that are willing to bring this level of vision to the screen, You know, I'm so in for whatever he's doing next. Edward Berger is definitely on my radar. I didn't like this movie, but I did like All Quiet. And like I said, both are cinematic masterpieces to me. The framing and blocking, the use of color, red robes for the win. You got to love those red robes. Like those just popped every time. Like that was really cool that he had those to work with. It was really, really cool.
And I have to say that, you know, as far as, you know, sort of the crux of the film, you know, again, being that sort of like, who's going to become Pope, like I was so uninvested in like absolutely everybody. Like the film exists, I think, to sort of put you in this place where you're on the edge of your seat waiting to see who's going to become Pope. And like, I think you're supposed to have like favorites and like not favorites. And like, we're supposed to hate John Lithgow and we're supposed to love Ray Fiennes. Like, I feel like the film wanted me to be rooting for Ray Fiennes, but I wasn't. Like, I wasn't rooting for anybody. Like, that was the biggest thing about it is I'm just like, dude, just pick anyone and let's get the hell out of here. I don't care who's going to be Pope. And furthermore, like, even though I know that, you know, we've got the one guy who's, you know, a bit more conservative. And so he's not like down with having gays in the church. And I know that, you know, this other guy is, you know, like they never really had those discussions, you know, like we were just sort of told that like, oh, this person is this and this person is that. And then, you know, Stanley Tucci's like telling Ray Fiennes, like, you know, you can't be in the middle here. You got to pick a side. And I'm like, I don't really feel like we have sides. I feel like it's just 50 people that are just there. And just like, again, like no part of me is invested. I'm not rooting for any one of these people any more or less than anyone else. Like, dude, just pick it and let's get home, bro. I don't care.
Well, to me, it was trying to be like religious Catholic 12 Angry Men, you know, where you get some people in a room and they're all trying to convince each other of a certain verdict. And you have a lot of reveals and twists and turns. Yeah, but what about this? And blah, blah, blah. And you pull the whole thing back slowly but surely to kind of unveil a larger narrative to get a resolve at the end. But like you said, I wasn't really on board with any of these people. One was as good as the next. Obviously, the super conservative racist guy was bad, but every time they would show, like a lot of that to me, unfortunately, had to do with Ray Fiennes' performance. As much as I want to really go to bat for that guy, I like Ray Fiennes a lot. I felt like every time there was a huge reveal for someone to be evil or some big bad thing to happen, at least in their view, religious views, it was all kind of handled like, oh, well, that's not very good, is it? We should do something about that. Like everything was very monotone in the responses. And I think if the responses would have been ramped up, you know, in a very Jack Nicholson, you can't handle the truth kind of way, I think that if we had gotten some of that fervor from some of these guys, but everyone's just kind of like blustering and blah, 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 blah.
Standing out here yelling rabble, rabble, rabble isn't going to help anything.
But we don't know what else to do, Mayor.
Rabble, 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 rabble.
You know, it's very pompous and stoic and just because they're old, crusty, you know, Catholic priests and cardinals and stuff. So I get it. Like it's kind of authentic, but that doesn't make for an exciting film for me to watch. I'm not like engaged, like in a Tom Clancy novel or, you know, something, some kind of, you know, The Firm or Mission Impossible or, you know, there's no kind of like a dun, 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 you know, moment at the end where I was on the edge of my seat waiting. And so by the time you get to that uterus reveal, I'm so checked out at that point that I'm like, cool.
Well, and you bring up a good point, you know, about sort of like, you know, Ray Fiennes' response, because I think that probably has a lot to do with, you know, our lack of engagement. Like if you figure that the protagonist of your film is sort of supposed to reflect the emotional journey, right? So that we as the audience are, you know, they're experiencing what we're experiencing and vice versa. There's a synergy. So, you know, when the protagonist is sad, we're sad because we're in the protagonist's shoes and we understand what's going on. But when you have a protagonist who reacts to everything with like a big shoulder shrug, like, why are we as an audience supposed to respond with anything other than a shoulder shrug? You know, you said it like, oh, you know, this dude's got a kid and he's like, well, guess he can't be Pope now. And we're like, oh yeah, I guess he can't be Pope now. And then John Lithgow paid for votes and it's like, oh, how's he going to respond? He's like, well, I guess you can't be Pope now. And we're like, yeah, I guess it can't be Pope now. So like, this is constantly just like shrugging your shoulders like, well, guess we're on to the next one. Well, guess we're on to the next one. And then they finally,
right.
And then even the big reveal at the end, guy reveals he has a uterus, and Ray Fiennes is like, well, guess he's got a uterus now. And so we're like, yeah, well, guess he's got a uterus. So it's just like, yeah, it's just the entire film is just a series of moments. And that doesn't make for an interesting film.
Yeah. I mean, it's the cinematic equivalent to like running your hands through your hair and a big exhale, like, it's like Ray Fiennes was that Ben Affleck meme of him like drinking coffee, smoking a cigarette that everybody uses. Where he's just like frustrated, just like, God, fuck, I just want to. And like the whole movie, he just wants out. Like he didn't want to be there in the first place. And he got, put into this position by the previous Pope who's like, nope, you got to stay in this. You're the only one. I need like a, voice of reason. So then I'm expecting as the viewer, like this whole, like he's been now set up and put in place as the voice of reason because the old Pope knew shit's going to shake. Like as soon as I go, there's going to be this whole reveal of stuff going on. And I need someone there to represent, the greater good. And then the reveals, especially by today's standards with our news cycles, like having a secret kid or, buying some votes is so tame compared to what I'm having to deal with on the daily in my own news cycles about what my government or my religion is throwing at me on the daily to try to process in my brain.
Yeah,
so, someone's got a secret kid. It's like, I mean, could be worse. That seems like slow pitch shit to me, like I could handle that. That's a pill I could swallow.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I will also just say that, so as we're recording this, we've had the Golden Globes, but not yet the Oscars. And of all things for this film to win a Golden Globe for, it won one Golden Globe, and that was for Best Screenplay. I'm just sitting here shaking my head like, what are you talking about? It's the absolute worst part of this film. Like, the acting wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. I think it's more just that the characters were so poorly drawn that like the actors didn't really have that much to do with it. Like you want to give this film best cinematography? You want to give this one best cinematography? No qualms. You want to give it best score? No qualms. Even if you want to give a couple acting, like, I don't think Ray Fiennes was as bad as like you thought he was necessarily. I thought he was just a little bit less interesting of a character. But even that, illustrates the way that the film leaves something on the table. So like, I kind of thought that and the film kind of intimates this at a certain point, which is that like, at a certain point, Ray Fiennes starts getting votes, right? And he's like, I don't want this. I don't want this. And then he starts to get more and more votes. And, he's kind of siphoning votes away from his like liberal counterpart of Stanley Tucci. And I thought that was a really interesting direction to go. I was like starting to really get into it. Like, oh, Ray Fiennes is actually just playing everybody, right? Like he really wants to be Pope, and this is his whole thing. He's going to be playing the wolf in sheep clothing, and this is why he's going and sending out his boy to go get the information, because like one by one, he's going to politically assassinate all of these people until he's the last man standing, and then he gets elected Pope, and then Stanley Tucci's giving him, stink eyes, and like it was all this great machination of, it just turned out that Ray Fiennes' character was playing everybody. Like that would have been a very interesting direction to go in. But then at a certain point, I like, especially once the guy who does get elected Pope has his monologue, it just completely abandons that. And then all of a sudden Ray Fiennes has no votes overnight for some reason. And so I was like, well, that was a weird red herring. You're like, hey, isn't this interesting? Isn't this interesting? I'm like, yes, it is. And it's like, we're not going there. It's like, well, okay, great. Well, screw you then. And me while we're at it.
Your consolation prize is a uterus. Good day, sir.
Good day, sir.
Good day, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I just was not invested in this film whatsoever. I almost wondered, too, as I was watching it, like, what if it wasn't Ray Fiennes? What if they got a younger actor? And so like nobody was taking him serious. And then that would have also brought like maybe more energy to some of the espionage scenes. Like when he was going through the dead Pope's room and like, kind of creaking in and stuff. Like if maybe a younger actor with more presence and energy like maybe like a Christian Bale, like or not Christian Bale, but Colin Farrell. Like, what if you got Colin Farrell to play that role, and he's like going around?
Colin
like,
Farrell as the Penguin in that role. That's
yeah,
that
right,
would
yeah,
have crushed.
yeah, that'd be great.
Hey, you guys, let me make the fucking Pope. I got this thing going on now. We're all gonna be rich. Don't worry, just let me be Pope, baby.
Going to get the papers. Going to get the papers. Yeah. Because didn't Ray Fiennes even vote for himself right at the time that the Sistine Chapel got bombed? And like that kind of leads into what you were thinking.
I couldn't keep track of people's names, so I literally didn't know if he was voting for Stanley Tucci or himself. I like couldn't figure it out because I didn't remember.
They should have just gone by their own names, and then we could have kept up. You know,
exactly.
Like,
and that just goes to show
Lithgow.
how thin the characters are. Like you're never looking at like John Lithgow's character and being like, that's Johnny Two Tone, and like, there, you know, Stanley Tucci, like, yeah, that Ramon Vega sure is a weird dude. Like, no, you're just being like, well, that's Stanley Tucci, and that's John Lithgow, and that's Ray Fiennes, and like, I'm never once thinking of them as their characters in the movie. I'm thinking them as actors in this film. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was even waiting for the reveal to be something like he's the Antichrist in a very kind of Omen kind of way, you know,
Sure,
and you get the Omen score coming in, you know, Nictus Dominus, you know,
eyes glow up,
and
right? Like, he's evil.
Right. Yeah. You know, he's got a pentagram around his neck or something we see in the closing shot as the new Pope walks out, you know. I don't, you know, he's got some prison tats or something. I don't know. But just the fact that he's intersex like that and got a uterus and not acting upon it. In fact, he was going to get surgery to have it removed. It's just a physical thing. It's not like, you know, it's impacting his
was a part of his identity or anything like that.
Yeah, he's supposedly doing great work in all these countries that are war torn and all of this. So good on him.
Yeah,
yeah.
The whole thing.
Maybe the world needs more uteruses.
Also, if boys had uteruses, they'd be called deuteruses.
We need more uteruses in the world.
It's a very soft landing when the big reveal comes at the end. It doesn't hit with any impact, and so it just kind of is, you know.
Right.
We can go ahead and wrap up this discussion with our formal star rating. And I do have to say that, like, the weird thing for me is, like, all of my displeasure from this film came on the back end. Like, I was actually kind of with it, especially for, like, the first half of it. And so much of that just had to do with the technical strengths. Again, like, not just, you know, the lighting of the cinematography, but the shot compositions. They're beautiful and they're interesting and they look stellar and spectacular. The tone that it's able to set throughout the film is actually pretty engaging for the first, 20, 30 minutes until you kind of realize that it's not really going anywhere. When all is said and done, I am going to give this 3 out of 5 stars just for that technical brilliance of the film and the fact that as I was watching it, I was still with it until, it let me know that like there was nothing here for me. I wasn't really like clawing my eyes out waiting for it to end or anything. It was just one of those films where the reveal comes and you're like, okay, that was a little underwhelming. And then like the more and more you think about it, you're like, no, that wasn't like kind of underwhelming. That was really underwhelming. Yeah, no, screw that ending. It has nothing to do with anything. So again, I will say that it's a very, very well made film, technically brilliant, but the story and the characters just went nowhere, leaving 3 out of 5 stars for me. What do you think, dude?
So yeah, Jason, I guess this movie is not for you or us. It's for you or them. I'm giving this one 2.5 very apprehensive stars. I will not be watching this again.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, totally respect and understand and agree with that. So now look, this film obviously did really well. I would imagine that there are people that are watching this review that right now that have a very different opinion of this film. So if you do, or even if you agree with our opinion and think this film was vastly overrated, we would love to hear from you. Please do leave a comment right here on the YouTube page, or you can feel free to visit our website, esotericacinema.com, and drop us a message there. For myself, Jason Peters, and my good friend, Ryan Seybold, this has been Esoterica Cinema. Keep appreciating film and enjoy the movies.